Hi, everyone. I am back today with our last feature in this month's theme for optionality, which was contingency planning, plan B and beyond. We all know things are so uncertain right now. A lot of us feel anxious. A lot of us feel there's a lot of volatility. And so we're all just trying to stay a little bit agile, stay, quick on our feet, think on our feet. And I thought I would close out the month by talking to some people who have a really big picture view of what is out there to support you, especially if you're working for a company, but even, we're talking also about some governmental benefits. A lot of people don't really know what kind of resources there are to help you when you have something happen that sets you back, whether it's your own a medical incident, whether it's you need to do some caregiving, whether you have an ill child, whether you need mat leave, and what happens when you get pregnant. And so, we thought let's talk to some folks who know this world inside and out, and they have seen people with a lot of different circumstances and had to help them navigate what is sometimes an extremely complex environment. So today I am joined by, we just figured out we've known each other more than 25 years, Laurie Halsey, who is someone I met back when I was still in corporate tech, which is a long time ago. And that's where we met, and we've stayed friends ever since. And she's like one of my, I just think she's so inspiring because she, as an adult with children and managing everything you can imagine, she went back to school twice, three times. You got your MBA. Are you in law school now? Is that the thing?
I am,
Yeah.
yes.
So she's just like always got something going that elevates her even further. And over time, she has become an HR professional who has been a chief human resources officer, who has run human resources. But you know what? Rather than me go on and on, I'm just wanting to tell you that I just admire Laurie's whole trajectory. And she's just an example of thinking, why not me? Let me just go for the next thing and keep going. And always has such a passion driving her. But let Laurie tell you a little bit about herself. How did you end up in the world of HR and learning so much about benefits for employers? And what is kind of the range of organizations you have worked with, that you have done HR? So what kinds of employees are you seeing from part-time to full-time, what is what are the worlds that you have walked in, while worrying about employees and their benefits and what they are able to do?
So first of all, thank you. Thank you for that. It humbles me. And certainly you have been one of the inspirations for my drive as well. So I couldn't believe that we've known each other for over 20 years. So, and certainly it's a friendship that I cherish. Oh, let's see, gosh, how did I end up in human resources? Initially not by choice. I will be really candid with you. Back when I started human resources, we called it personnel management, right? And it was more, like it was more tactical paper pushing, which wasn't something that was very attractive to me. And I resisted, worked in, as you know, in operations and in sales, but getting pulled back. And finally I just decided, I keep getting pulled back, I'm going to stay. Went back to school, learned a lot more about it. And really, really by that time, it was what we call now human resources, right? It had moved more into the strategical side. We actually had a voice and a seat at the table, and that voice was being heard. Right. So I think at that time, employers really understood the importance of having an effective HR leader and then the team. Gosh, I have worked, as you know, we've met in high tech. That's where I started my career in human resources. And then I've also worked in the hospitality industry. And most recently, I think in the last 12 years, have worked in the healthcare space. Certainly, that has evolved. And it's at the end of the day, I see my role as business. For me, means people, right? And people are in every kind of industry. And I'm fortunate that, I can certainly work in different areas without any limitations.
And to personalize this a little bit, I mentioned that you had children when I first met you, and So you were yourself dealing with caregiving while working full time the whole time I've known you. So was that something that you had was an ongoing pressure for you through much of your
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
personal
absolutely.
caregiving you had to do?
Yes. So when you and I met and worked together, right? I was a single mom. I had two little ones, and I had the caregiving benefits and assistance were non-existent, right? At all. Not that they've gotten any better now, but absolutely, that was always a pressure, right? You're managing and balancing your priorities at home and your responsibilities, taking care of two little ones that I had no one, living that could care for them.
Yeah.
And then you have your priorities and responsibilities of work, and how do you balance that? And you don't want to jeopardize your work because
Right.
you need it.
Right.
And then you have your kids, right? So my children would come home, and I would rely on them calling me after school, letting me know they were safely at home. I was fortunate that the bus actually stopped right in front of my apartment complex. I
Oh,
was
wow.
lucky. Not everybody has that, right? But even that, many things can happen from the door, from the drop-off point to the door. So the anxiety level for me every day was real.
And so join me now in welcoming Maite Delgado. And Maite, thank you for joining me. And I must with pride say that Maite is my prima, my cousin. And so when I was like, oh, yay, I get to interview someone from my family. It's so nice.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Um, so, as you know, my name is Maite Delgado, and I have been working in the medical field predominantly for 38 years.
Oh.
Yeah, and it all just really started with working in my business background. It started with my business background, and I was working as a bookkeeper for a big dermatology group. And I've always been interested in the medical field. Really, my parents used to say if I only just stayed focused in my younger years, I probably could have made it through med school because I was always very interested in medicine. But yeah, lo and behold, no focus when I was young. Um, so that's how it started. It just started, in a dermatology. I was in business, and I wasn't so involved with the administrative side. It was mostly bookkeeping. And slowly but surely, I started to insert myself a little bit more in the clinical side. And then one of the physicians saw the interest, and he actually sent me to get certified at UCSF. So I became a certified assistant, and then I was also certified in the photochemotherapy treatments. My role just eventually evolved, and while I was still very interested in the clinical side, I really, really had a stronger desire to be in the business side. And so I moved from there to the vascular side to be the business office manager. And in that practice, I was more involved with benefits. I started to get into the HR component. I was never really like full-fledged HR, like I kind of am now.
Yeah.
But it came with the role, it came
Mhm.
with the management role. So I started to learn more about, benefits, and not just healthcare benefits, but also rights of employees.
Mhm.
And that was very interesting to me because at that time, this was, I don't know, gosh, 35 years ago, maybe. It wasn't as heightened as it is right now, employee
Yeah.
rights. And so it was a little more lenient. Employers got away with a lot more. And I never saw that as right. So I used to always be on the employee side, Anyway, moving forward, I just kept moving into higher positions. And now I've worked at this orthopedic practice for 10 years now.
Oh, okay.
And I pretty much am responsible for every aspect of the practice, and HR is a big thing because we live in California, right?
How many employees are in this practice?
I have a little under 100.
Okay, so still over the 50, I think most of us think of if you hit 50 employees, you got to have, there's some new regulations that come in and hit you about things you have to do. But 100
Well,
is still
it's really now it's really over 20. A lot of the
really.
laws apply to the
Oh,
company. Yeah.
oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
gotten smaller since I ran
Yes.
my
Yes.
company, which
Yes.
by
Yes.
now is more than 10 years since Blogger got acquired. But
Yeah.
100, I think, still qualifies as a small to medium business, and you're sort of maybe not you're not having the scale of some of the big tech companies, but you're big enough that
Yeah.
you need to do a lot of stuff that's regulated.
Well, I think in California, even if you have 5 employees, you have to, anytime you have an employee, you really have to have um, real awareness of HR and everything
Yeah.
that's, bundled into HR. I have mid-level managers under me, and we have to meet, almost bi-weekly, and we
Uh-huh.
talk about updates and what's new, and if they're having issues with their teams, and because I need to guide them and make sure that we are always compliant. Compliance is very huge for us.
Yeah.
We've been very lucky
Yeah.
because we're very compliant, so we've been,
Knock on
yes,
wood.
definitely, yeah. So we've been quite fortunate in that arena.
Well, and also you're in the medical field, which is also heavily regulated. Like you kind of got a double whammy there, right? It's
Even
just,
more,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Even more so. So you have the regular California HR laws, then you have some federal things bundled in because we take Medicare and Medi-Cal. So we have some federal fund payments coming to us. So we have to incorporate a lot of the federal laws into it too.
yeah. For those of you who don't know, California is a very employee-friendly state. I have encountered when I've worked either for companies that were headquartered in other states, or when my company got acquired by a company that was in another state, they were like working on employment contracts, there were things that I just had to tell them, you could put that in your agreement, but it's not enforceable in California. Like it's very
Yeah.
employee friendly.
Okay, what are the basics, would you say, about how most employers contribute to employee care needs? What are they required to do by law? But even beyond that, what do you think is relatively standard benefit offering from an employer to their employees? You know what? And I was looking into this yesterday, right? And unfortunately, there aren't any federal or state mandated laws that really address caregiving, right? That becomes a personalized benefit from every employer. I know that we know there are benefits, for example, if you have to attend a school activity, right? You can certainly, that's only 40 hours a year. And so it becomes really limited, but when it comes to actual childcare, um, there isn't much help out there right now. So it becomes again employer driven. I work for some organizations where that becomes a focus, right? The need to ensure that your employees have some sort of assistance, but it's more on a voluntary basis versus a mandated basis.
It's very individualized by employer. Majority of employers don't really actually want to get involved in that aspect because there's liability attached to it. Right. And so it's just all about the risk and liability.
You mean like providing on-site childcare?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Because if you're providing it, even if they're paying for it, or even if they're not paying for it, then more so the risk is there, right? But in terms of employer to the employees, we just have become of a culture where if it involves childcare challenges, or they have to go pick up their kids at school, we make it work for them. We're very family friendly. We're very respectful of the fact that families really should come first, and that's been a culture and mindset that's been so far removed from society, right?
Yeah.
And because I come from such a family that I value very much, my immediate and extended family, I wanted to incorporate that culture here in the workplace too.
Beyond childcare, though, and we think of it as like, I know there are some leave, whether it's for personal medical leave or family leave, and that could apply to your kids if they're ill, or disability. Like, so do all employers contribute into, I know California has state disability. That's how many employees get mat leave benefits. Is there a federal disability payment that employers?
There is. No, absolutely. So when it comes to, for example, job protection based on if you are ill or if your dependents are ill, right? Yes. So on the federal level, you have FMLA, which you can definitely, which is the Family and Medical Leave Act. You are entitled to up to 12 weeks once you met the criteria, right? You can.
That's unpaid, right?
It is unpaid by the employer, but you can apply for disability. And in most cases, anyone who's eligible for FMLA is able to take advantage of disability. In most employers, when it comes to FMLA, they're very flexible, right? Because even after the employee exhausts their FMLA benefits, then you have ADA, which is the American Disability Act, which if you still have a need for flexibility, then employers are, at least in my experience, they're really willing to work with you to ensure that you are going to be taking care of not only yourself, but your dependents. So there's definitely, there are protections for pregnant employees. You, aside from from FMLA, you have the California Family Rights Act, right, which is CFRA, which also, all of it is unpaid, but you are entitled to disability benefits as well.
That was going to be my question. I know from my own experience as an employer that my employees who went on mat leave who lived in California got short-term disability payments, which wasn't their full salary by any stretch, but it was helpful through the state. Does every state have that? Do you know? I don't know if you've ever worked with like employees scattered around the country.
Yeah, I have, and I think California has more benefits than I have experienced with other states. Everybody mostly falls into the federal FMLA, but I think with California, we tend to be a little more understanding, even if that's the right word. So we understand the need of our employees, right? And we certainly understand the importance of making sure that they're caring for themselves and their loved ones so they can come back to work and be happy, productive employees.
Yeah. So do you find when you're hiring people, are they asking different questions now than maybe they did 10 years ago about, I think also with the COVID lockdown, I think people got into a different mindset around flexibility, around being able to care, offer care and be able to take care of things that maybe they didn't used to. Do you feel that comes into the conversations when people are interviewing?
Not so much like the common staff, but maybe higher level, candidates that we may be looking to hire, like therapists or nurse practitioners.
Yeah.
They do ask a little bit more about those questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, try to negotiate instead of full-time 40 hours. They want to negotiate either 32 hours a week or 4/10s.
Oh, so you're open to that kind of arrangement?
Always.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
There is a lot of thinking around the 4-day work week and I kind of feel like we might be generally more headed in that direction. So in another area that I'm kind of curious about, I was wondering, are there benefits that you see that employees tend to forget exist or don't want to take advantage of. The thing that really triggered me to think about this is every time I've worked for a company that was big enough to institute a suite of benefits, there's something called the Employee Assistance Program, which is really more about mental health, substance abuse. These are programs that are for the employee if they have problems. And I know as a manager, I wouldn't know if they partook of this program. But I'm curious, do people really leverage these programs, or is there a stigma around them, or do they not really know what exists out there for them?
I think it's a combination, Elisa. I agree with you. The unfortunate part of having, an employee assistance program is that it's very confidential. There aren't any sort of measurable data that are privy to, where we can say, oh, 50% of our employees, right? Because it is very confidential. It's between whatever service the employee is tapping into, and it's between the employee and this service. And so the employer, we don't have access to that information. But I would agree with you that it is not utilized, and it is a benefit that certainly, especially within these times right now, would be so beneficial, right, for all employees. As employers, I think what we do is we communicate, we encourage, but I also agree that there is a stigma, right? There is a stigma where employees may feel that if an employer, or if they reach out and they ask for a certain kind of service, especially around mental illness, right? That they're going to be somehow, that's going to be a negative.
Yeah.
There for in the employment world, right? Especially when it comes to any sort of advancement or promotional opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, right? It really is unfortunate.
Because basically what has to happen is an employee has to get that information from your employee. Laurie once helped me write an employee handbook for BlogHer, actually. So I just reminded myself of that. You have this information in your employee handbook about what your EAP is, or you have things posted. If you work in California, you've seen the bulletin board that has like 1 million notices. I don't know if it's quite as extensive in every state, but a lot of notices. So basically what we're counting on is that employees know this program exists, knows there are a couple of confidential places they could go look for the information, and they call a confidential, hotline or whatever to get access. Do managers ever suggest it to employees, or is that forbidden? I mean, are you not allowed to say, hey, seems like maybe you could use some help in this regard?
So we don't recommend it, but what we do is we do offer it, right? If we see, and you know what, and you brought up a really good point, right? Because sometimes we will get information from other employees that inform us or let us know, this is what's happening. There's certain things that we are allowed and not allowed to ask about. One of the things that I always encourage managers is, don't ask. If they're not sharing, don't ask. But certainly you can give them, this flyer that we have. You can let them know that, here's additional information in case you need any of these services. And even that, we're a little careful. So what we try to do is we try to make sure that the information is available to all employees in areas where they don't feel that someone's going to be watching them if they take a flyer.
Yeah.
We put it in our intranet so they can download a flyer. But what we do is we're really careful because we don't want to make someone uncomfortable, right? If they're not willing to share.
Hot topic in the world of HR, I'm sure, which is working for, location, style, flexibility. So the COVID lockdown, we had all these, for some companies, there were a lot of new arrangements. For some companies, some of it wasn't new. They were already doing stuff like that. But, for a lot of people who have caregiving responsibilities from children to elders, it took some of the pressure off because they knew although it's very hard to work and caregive simultaneously in the moment, but just being proximity, not having your commute, knowing you're so close to home. Let's leave aside whether you have to homeschool your kids while trying to work full time. That seems like a whole other thing. But so I think a lot of people got used to a lot of location flexibility, hours flexibility. Are you seeing a trend? And we hear a lot of headlines about it being taken away by some very big company CEOs who want everyone to come back, right? But I'm not sure that's really happening at the line level at a lot of small to medium to even big companies. I'm not sure the CEOs who aren't making people come in every day are making headlines. So I'm kind of curious what you're seeing from a trend point of view. Has a lot of that flexibility survived people being past the lockdown phase? And if not, are you seeing people push back more? Do people feel, is there attrition? I mean, what are you experiencing out there? And what are you seeing when what are you hearing when you talk to your colleagues?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think with the COVID lockdown and the reasoning and the individuals who were able to work from home,
Yeah.
Some of us were not, right? If you're in healthcare, you're considered an essential worker. So I remember I was working from 6 a.m. in the morning to 9 p.m. at night. I was working for an extremely large healthcare service organization, and we just didn't have that luxury. However, folks for the same organization in administration were able to.
Yeah.
Years later, right? I was working for a mid-size organization. And I think it's very, to your question, it is very driven by the organization and the motivation and the reasonings for that, right? So there's a lot of reasons why one, as an organization, would make a decision to either continue to have flexibility on remote work versus not. I can speak to our motivation when I was working at this organization, which is more mid-sized, right? So we looked at all the pros and cons. Certainly, we noticed that the productivity levels in some areas had increased, which is great, right? We had happy employees. We looked at the cost for the employees, no cost in commuting. They were able to provide care. They were given a lot more flexibility on their work. And so from the employee perspective, it allowed flexibility and it gave them options. From the company perspective, cost-wise, we ended up scaling down. We had this large brick and mortar building, which we no longer had a need for, right? So we ended up scaling down to a much smaller office. So again, I think it depends on the organization, right? So based on, we ended up saving money. Attrition really wasn't an issue for us because our employees were happy, right?
Yeah.
They certainly understood the expectation, and we did have areas where we did have to talk to employees and go through the whole performance management process with them. But overall, most of our employees really embraced, and for that organization, it ended up being, good. It was a good change for us, and we just maintained it. And to my knowledge, a lot of the employees who remotely work are still working remotely. We had, it wasn't 100%, but we were on a rotation with a smaller office where certain departments would come in on a Monday and others would come in on a Tuesday and others would work. So we had a shared kind of cubicle office space, and that worked well because we didn't want to lose that personal touch, right? We still believe that there's a value for a team coming together in person.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I feel like that this should be halcyon times for HR, because it's, to me, whenever I hear someone arguing for just get everybody back, it's either you can't keep track of people's performance or they don't believe you innovate the same. And I'm like, well, performance is HR's like raison d'etre to like make sure people are communicating what are the goals and expectations and how are you staying on top of it. And if you didn't know how to do it when they're working at home, did you really know how to do it when they were working in the office?
Exactly.
And then innovation. I mean, there are countless examples of innovative companies who have been remote before COVID ever existed. So again, it seems to me like this is like boom times for the value of how you communicate, the infrastructure of working, the goals, expectations, the like everything about it. Seems like this is HR's moment to shine, to help companies do better in working in the remote way, because that'll make them do better at working any way they decide eventually to go, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Laurie. It was so great to talk to you, and also to get to talk to you in this way, you know, and really just hear you share your wisdom that you've developed over these years. Laurie Halsey, thank you again.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
I'm hearing, speaking of layoffs, and it might not be so much in your industry. I'm just curious if you've heard any. I'm hearing stories about women being laid off during or immediately following their mat leave, and
Oh, yeah,
I thought that was protected.
it is protected. So interestingly, I just attended an employment law conference on Friday.
Oh, okay.
And it was very good and interesting, but very exhausting
Yeah.
to hear all of the laws and all of the changes. And they did touch on that subject, that it seems to be a trend that when a company, and especially a tech company, you know, they're very famous for mass layoffs, right? And then
Yes.
mass hiring, and then more
Yes.
mass layoffs. But it seems to be the trend that the people that they are including in those mass layoffs, not only women, but anybody who has just either returned from a leave of absence or from a maternity leave, or are seeking an extended maternity leave. Because in California, even if you've exhausted your baby bonding, you know, and everything, if you claim postpartum depression, you have to give them, you know, that you have to get into an interactive process with the employee to support them and give them, you know, that extended leave. That's not really protected, but you really want to challenge that in court, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it costs a lot of money to defend yourself, right? And yes, so that is a trend that they brought up. I've not experienced it, obviously, you know, in my industry, but they interestingly brought that up at that conference, that seems to be the new trend. But of course, lawsuits are flying around, you know, so these employees know their rights.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I don't know if they think they can get away with it, and that most people won't challenge them, or they just have such deep pockets they don't mind.
that's what it is. They're big companies, they're giants, and they have deep pockets. And so the for employee HR attorney thinks twice before taking these kinds of cases against the big Googles, and unless it's a class action suit kind of thing, because they could just really drag it out. And
the other thing they've been doing is instead of calling it a layoff, they tell them it's for performance. And they also did that with some of these federal government layoffs. But even Meta and some of the big companies, instead of, even though they're following the WARN Act. So for those of you who don't know the WARN Act, if you're laying off over a certain amount, you have to give them a certain amount of notice or severance.
Correct.
I mean, and you have to, if they're over 45, you have to give them an anonymized list of everyone in their age range who is laid off, because I guess to prove that it's not just older people being laid off. I don't know. And so they're following those rules, and yet they're saying it's for performance. And I'm like, why would you go out of your way to ding
so
somebody?
what they do is they the other thing they brought up is, as soon as you come back from leave, not very long after you come back from leave, if they're looking to do this layoff, they create performance improvement plans.
Yeah.
You know, it's a performance things. But there's a thing called de minimis proximity.
Okay.
And if you're coming back from a leave and all of a sudden they slap this performance, you know, issue within 90 days, but then in California, it could even go for 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You could sue for retaliation, wrongful termination, disability discrimination. Like, there's all these things bundled into it. Now, I can't imagine that these big companies that are doing it don't have a robust HR company that aren't aware of this. But to your point, they just don't care.
Yeah. Wow. Well, those are your rights though, nonetheless, which, is kind of what I just wanted to talk to you today about some of the things that are available to people that they may not know about, things that are their rights they may not know about. And, I even learned a few things I did not know about in this conversation. So Maite, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your wisdom in this area. And do you have anywhere that people like? Do you publish anything you want people to come check you out, or like?
No, no time to publish anything. Yeah, thank you
Usually
so
I
much
end.
for having me.
Yeah, usually I end by saying, "How can people find you, or how can people support your work?" And you're like, "I'm working. I'm good. Like, thanks so
Yeah,
much."
yeah.
Okay.
I keep myself active, not only here at work, but I join a lot of organizations. Like,
Yes.
I'm part of SAVE, right?
Yes.
Um, and I am very active in like the COA and the MGMA, because we like to fight legislature,
What is it? What are so save is
COA is the California Orthopedic Association. MGMA is a national, like a management group.
uh-huh.
But they're so huge. And the AMA, which is American Medical
Yes.
Association, when legislation comes out that impacts, especially for pay cuts for the physicians, like through Medicare, I definitely get myself involved, and we fight.
And actually
big
say a
guys.
few words about Save because it's a great organization and I'm happy to share that with
It's an
everybody.
awesome organization. It's safe alternatives for violent environments. And we provide shelter for men and women, who were in abusive relationships. We give them the shelter with their children, whatever they need. And then we help them get a head start in life. We either relocate them or give them grants for further education, help them find jobs, apartments,
Hmm.
whatever they need to start that new life. But before even submitting to that kind of commitment, they have to go through extensive counseling. Under SAVE, we have counselors on site,
Oh, great.
and they have to go through extensive counseling to make sure, because 80%, the odds are 80% they go back to their abusers. So we try to do everything we can to avoid that.
Is it save.org?
It is save.org. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes. So check that out. All
Check
right.
it out. We welcome any kind of donation. It goes to a great cause.
Yes.
We
Thank
keep
you.
nothing. We work for free there. So
Oh, great. Thanks, Maite.
thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.